Welcome to another deep dive. Today we are tackling a classic Italian dessert with a bit of a twist, cannoli cookies. I'm already craving that perfect blend of crunchy and creamy.
And you're in for a real treat because the history of cannoli is just as rich as that ricotta filling.
Oh, wow.
We're talking over 1,000 years of tradition dating all the way back to Sicily.
1,000 years. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I had no idea they had such a long history. So, how did we get from ancient Sicilian tradition to the modern cannoli cookie we're making today?
Well, it's a fascinating journey. During the Arab rule of Sicily, they introduced key ingredients like sugar, citrus, and ricotta cheese. And these components became essential to cannoli, giving them a unique fusion flavor profile.
Fusion dessert. That's a new one for me.
Oh.
I'm definitely intrigued, though. So tell me, what makes these cannoli cookies different from the traditional cannoli I've seen in bakeries?
Well, traditional cannolis are made with those fried shells, which can be a bit challenging for the home baker.
Yeah, for sure.
Cannoli cookies simplify things by baking the shells, making them much more approachable.
Oh, that's great to hear. Baking definitely feels less intimidating than frying. But I'm curious, do we still get that authentic cannoli flavor with the baked cookie base?
Absolutely. The cookie base uses simple ingredients, flour, butter, brown sugar, and we'll add mini chocolate chips for a fun twist. And of course, the filling stays true to tradition with creamy ricotta cheese, powdered sugar, and a touch of vanilla.
Okay, that sounds easy enough, even for a beginner baker like me. And I love the idea of chocolate chips in the cookie base. Now, before we get into the baking process, any secrets to making these cannoli cookies extra special?
One key tip is to make sure your ricotta is well drained.
Okay.
This is crucial for achieving a firm filling that holds its shape beautifully between the cookies. You can drain it in a fine mesh sieve lined with cheesecloth for about 30 minutes to get rid of excess moisture.
Good to know. I'll definitely remember the cheesecloth trick. Now, can we talk about customization? I'm always looking for ways to personalize my baking.
Customization is the fun part. You could add a teaspoon or two of lemon zest to the ricotta filling for a bright citrusy flavor that complements the sweetness.
Ooh, I actually did that with some mini cheesecakes last week, and the lemon zest was a game changer. What about other additions? I'm thinking nuts might be a good fit.
You're spot on. Chopped pistachios would be fantastic. They add a delicious crunch and a nutty flavor that pairs beautifully with the ricotta. You can fold them directly into the filling or sprinkle them on top for decoration.
Okay, both of those sound amazing. Lemon zest and pistachios are going on my shopping list. Now, before I completely lose myself in flavor combinations, can we walk through the basic recipe steps?
Absolutely. First, we'll preheat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
While the oven heats up, we'll combine the flour, softened butter, brown sugar, and mini chocolate chips to make the cookie dough.
So it's a pretty standard cookie dough recipe, which is reassuring for someone like me who's not a baking expert. Now, what's the secret to getting those perfectly golden brown cookies?
Once the dough is mixed, we'll scoop out portions, place them on a baking sheet, and bake them for about 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay.
Or until they reach that beautiful golden brown color.
10 to 12 minutes. That's quick.
Yeah.
So while those cookies are baking and filling our kitchens with that irresistible aroma, what do we do next?
While the cookies bake, we'll prepare the creamy ricotta filling. We'll combine the well-drained ricotta cheese, powdered sugar, and vanilla extract in a bowl and mix them until smooth and creamy.
That sounds simple enough. Now here comes the part I'm most excited about. Assembling the cookies. Do we just slather the filling onto the warm cookies straight from the oven?
Not so fast. Patience is key here. We need to let those cookies cool completely before we add the filling.
Oh, right.
Otherwise, the filling might melt and become runny.
Right, good point. I can wait, especially knowing that it'll result in perfectly formed cannoli cookies. So once the cookies are cool, how do we assemble them?
Once our cookies have cooled down, we'll generously spread or pipe the ricotta filling onto one cookie and top it with another cookie, creating a sandwich.
And then comes the grand finale. The powdered sugar dusting right.
Exactly.
It's not just for decoration. It adds a touch of sweetness and completes the classic cannoli look.
You got it. We'll gently dust the assembled cookies with powdered sugar, using a fine mesh sieve or a small shaker for an even coating. It's like a final touch of magic.
I love that visual, a sprinkle of magic. But before we get carried away with powdered sugar dreams, I have a question about the filling. Is there a secret to achieving that perfect texture, not too runny and not too thick?
You're right, the texture of the filling is important.
Yeah.
Remember how we talked about well-drained ricotta? That's key. If your ricotta is too wet, the filling will be runny. If it's too dry, it might be crumbly.
So finding that sweet spot of ricotta moisture is crucial. Now, for those of us who might not have all the fancy baking tools, are there any alternatives to a piping bag for filling the cookies?
Absolutely. You can use a spoon or spatula to spread the filling, or even a zip-top bag with a corner snipped off for a makeshift piping bag. Don't let equipment limitations stop you from enjoying these delicious cookies.
I love that these recipes are adaptable for everyone. So now we have our cannoli cookies assembled, beautifully dusted with powdered sugar, ready to be devoured. But before we take that first bite, what are some fun facts about cannoli that our listeners might not know?
Well, you mentioned earlier that cannoli have a long history in Sicily. They were traditionally made during Carnival, a festive celebration similar to Mardi Gras that takes place before Lent.
Carnivale. I've heard of it, but don't know much about it. What exactly is it?
Carnival is a time of revelry, costumes, parades, and of course, indulging in delicious food before the fasting period of Lent begins.
Okay.
It's a tradition that dates back centuries and is celebrated in many parts of the world, especially in Italy and Brazil.
So cannolis are like a little taste of Carnival, a festive treat to enjoy before things get serious.
Exactly.
That adds a whole new layer of appreciation for these cookies.
And here's another fun fact. Cannolis were considered symbols of fertility and abundance due to their tube shape.
Fertility and abundance. Now that's a lot of symbolism packed into one little cookie. And speaking of little tubes, does the word cannoli have anything to do with their shape?
You guessed it. Cannoli actually means little tubes in Italian, referring to the shape of the pastry shell.
So every time we bite into a cannoli, we're experiencing a little bit of history, symbolism, and linguistic charm. That's incredible. But before we get too carried away with the history lesson, should we guide our listeners through the actual baking process?
Yes. Let's preheat those ovens and get started on our cannoli cookie adventure.
I'm ready to get my hands dirty and create some deliciousness. I'm still thinking about those little tubes of deliciousness and all that history we unpacked in the last segment.
Well, get ready for more, because today we're taking those cannoli cookies to the next level.
Okay.
We'll be exploring some fun variations and serving suggestions that will impress even the most discerning dessert lover.
I love how versatile these cookies are. We already talked about adding lemon zest and pistachios, but what other creative twists can we add to our ricotta filling?
Well, the possibilities are truly endless. For a truly decadent treat, you could fold in some mini chocolate chips.
Ooh, yeah?
Or even a swirl of Nutella.
Oh, Nutella. That's a stroke of genius. I can already imagine the creamy hazelnut flavor blending with the ricotta. What about toppings? Aside from the classic powdered sugar dusting, what else can we use to decorate our cannoli cookies?
We could drizzle them with melted chocolate.
Yeah.
Dark milk or even white chocolate would work beautifully.
Okay.
And for a pop of color and freshness, consider adding some chopped candied fruit or a sprinkle of colorful sprinkles.
I love those ideas. It's like decorating a blank canvas with delicious possibilities.
Yeah.
Now, for those of us who might be a little clumsy in the kitchen, any tips for achieving a drizzle that's more elegant than messy?
Absolutely. Instead of drizzling directly from the bowl, try transferring your melted chocolate into a zip-top bag.
Okay.
Snip off a tiny corner of the bag and gently squeeze the chocolate out for a controlled and even drizzle.
That's a great tip. I can already picture myself creating those Instagram-worthy chocolate swirls. Now let's talk about serving these delicious creations. What are some beverage pairings that would complement the flavors of our cannoli cookies?
For a classic pairing, you can't go wrong with a strong espresso or a cappuccino. The bitterness of the coffee balances the sweetness of the cookies perfectly.
I could practically taste that combination now. The creamy coffee, the crunchy cookie, the sweet ricotta filling. It's a symphony of flavors. But what if we're in the mood for something a bit more festive?
If you're looking for something a little more celebratory, a sweet dessert wine like Moscato d'Asti would be a delightful accompaniment. Its fruity and floral notes complement the ricotta filling and any citrus zest you might have added.
Moscato d'Asti, noted. That sounds like a perfect way to end a meal on a sweet note. But what about those of us who prefer non-alcoholic options?
Don't worry, we've got you covered. For a refreshing non-alcoholic pairing, try serving your cannoli cookies with a tall glass of iced tea or lemonade. The tartness of the citrus cuts through the richness of the cookies beautifully.
Iced tea or lemonade on a warm day with a plate of these cookies sounds like the perfect summer treat. But I have to ask, with all these delicious variations and pairings, is there a wrong way to enjoy a cannoli cookie?
The best way to enjoy a cannoli cookie is the way that brings you the most joy. Whether you prefer it classic or with a twist paired with coffee or wine, or simply on its own, savor every bite and let your taste buds guide you.
That's such great advice. It's all about embracing our own personal preferences and enjoying the moment. But before we wrap up this segment, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, the symbolic meaning of cannoli.
Okay.
We talked about them representing fertility and abundance, but what other cultural significance do these treats hold?
That's a great question. Cannoli are deeply intertwined with Italian culture and tradition.
Yeah.
In Sicily, they're not just a dessert. They're a symbol of celebration, family gatherings, and special occasions.
So, by making and enjoying cannoli cookies, we're tapping into that rich cultural heritage. It's like a little taste of Italy in every bite.
Exactly. And it goes beyond cultural heritage. Think about the personal traditions you might create around food. Maybe you have a special recipe you only make for holidays, or a family dinner where everyone contributes their signature dish.
We do a big potluck Thanksgiving every year.
Oh, fun.
And everyone fights over who brings the sweet potato casserole. But it's less about the food and more about everyone being together.
Precisely. Those shared food experiences create a sense of belonging and connection.
Yeah.
Food becomes a way to express love, care, and togetherness.
And when you share something you've made yourself, like these cannoli cookies, it adds another level of meaning. It's like sharing a piece of your heart, your creativity.
Absolutely. There's a certain satisfaction and joy that comes from nourishing others with food you've prepared with your own hands.
Right.
It's a form of communication, a way to connect on a deeper level.
We've talked about so many aspects of food today, from history and tradition to personal memories and emotional connections. Any final thoughts for our listeners as they embark on their own culinary adventures?
As you explore different cuisines and experiment in your own kitchen, be mindful of the stories behind the food you eat. Consider the cultural significance, the ingredients, the people who cultivated those ingredients.
Right.
And remember the power of food to create connections, evoke memories, and bring joy to yourself and those around you.
That's a beautiful way to wrap up our deep dive into cannoli cookies. It's more than just a recipe. It's an exploration of history, culture, and the power of food to connect us all.
Thank you for joining us on this delicious journey.
Until next time, happy baking, everyone. Welcome back to our final deep dive into the world of cannoli cookies.
We've explored the history, the recipe, even the symbolism.
Yeah.
Now we're going beyond the deliciousness to explore the deeper connection we all have with food.
I'm ready to get philosophical.
Yeah.
We've talked about the cultural significance of cannoli, but on a personal level, how do our individual experiences shape our relationship with food?
Well, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Food is more than just sustenance.
Right.
It's a sensory experience, a cultural touchstone, and a powerful trigger for memories and emotions.
It's funny you mentioned memories. Just the smell of baking bread takes me right back to my childhood kitchen. My grandmother used to bake every Saturday morning.
That's a perfect example of
Yeah.
how food can transport us back in time.
Yeah.
Certain flavors and aromas can evoke vivid memories and emotions connecting us to our past and our loved ones.
It's like each bite holds a story.
Yeah.
And with those cannoli cookies, we're tapping into centuries of Italian tradition. It's more than just a dessert.
Right.
It's a lineage.
Exactly. And it goes beyond cultural heritage.
Yeah.
Think about the personal traditions you might create around food.
Okay.
Maybe you have a special recipe you only make for holidays, or a family dinner where everyone contributes their signature dish.
We do a big potluck Thanksgiving every year.
Oh, nice.
And everyone fights over who brings the sweet potato casserole. But it's less about the food and more about everyone being together.
Precisely. Those shared food experiences create a sense of belonging and connection.
Yeah.
Food becomes a way to express love, care, and togetherness.
And when you share something you've made yourself, like these cannoli cookies, it adds another level of meaning.
For sure.
It's like sharing a piece of your heart, your creativity.
Absolutely. There's a certain satisfaction and joy that comes from nourishing others with food you've prepared with your own hands.
It really is.
It's a form of communication, a way to connect on a deeper level.
We've talked about so many aspects of food today, from history and tradition to personal memories and emotional connections. Any final thoughts for our listeners as they embark on their own culinary adventures?
As you explore different cuisines and experiment in your own kitchen, be mindful of the stories behind the food you eat. Consider the cultural significance, the ingredients, the people who cultivated those ingredients. And remember the power of food to create connections, evoke memories, and bring joy to yourself and those around you.
That's a beautiful way to wrap up our deep dive into cannoli cookies. It's more than just a recipe.
Yeah.
It's an exploration of history, culture, and the power of food to connect us all.
Thank you for joining us on this delicious journey.
Until next time, happy baking, everyone.